three things to talk about here. First, I would suggest get rid of that word just from your vocabulary. When I'm doing practice interviews with either undergraduates or but particularly postgraduates and even more postdoctoral staff, so often you'll ask a question, something like, okay, so how did you set up that collaboration? And the answer comes back, well, I just asked and they said yes, which completely downplays your achievement. Basically, it undermines any achievements that you've got by saying, well, it wasn't really worth it, was it? It was just doing this, it was only doing that. So you need to think about being able to not overhype your achievements, but to be able to feel comfortable about telling people how you did things and being able to make the most of some of the achievements that you've got. Another thing which is important is to recognize those achievements. You know, go back to that first slide where we were talking about all the different things that you can do now, all those things about analyzing data, about being able to put together an argument, about being able to find information out of a mass of information and focus on what's important. You need to put that in language and a context that an employer will recognize. So if you're talking to academic employers, it's fine to talk about academic background. But if you're talking to non-academic employers, you really want to try and put it into some context which doesn't always mention a thesis or doesn't try to throw lots and lots of data tables at them. This is where I think doing a lot of public engagement while you're doing your postgraduate degree can really, really help, because that public engagement helps you start to think about how you can get across your postgraduate experience to people who haven't been there. And you may find that your recruiters are postgraduates themselves, but the vast majority won't be. The vast majority will, if anything, have an undergraduate degree and lots of experience, but won't necessarily understand automatically what you've done as a postgrad. There's one other thing which Carl Gilliard from the Association of Graduate Recruiters pointed out, which he thought was, I thought was particularly useful for postgrads. One of the things which employers are looking for more and more these days is they don't want people who want to be trained up, who want to be molded into the way that employers want them to behave. They want people who are self-sufficient. This is where the postgraduate experience should set you apart. They want people who are self-aware, so that you know what you're good at, you know what you're not so good at, and you can do something about it. They want people who can manage themselves, who don't have to be told what to do. And certainly as postgrads, you've had to get used to that. Now, the one which might be more challenging is they want people with good self-esteem. They want people who are confident in their abilities and who can say what they're capable of doing. And the further on that you go in postgraduate research particularly, and certainly into postdoctoral research, I sometimes see people's self-esteem plunge. You know, it's high as an undergraduate and then gets terribly low as a postdoc. So this is one you might want to work on to remind yourself just how good you really are. They also want people to be able to manage their own learning and their own careers. Employers don't want somebody who's going to have to be told how to go and find out how to do something. And again, postgrads win there. And in most cases, postgrads are pretty independent and they want to do things their way. So learning how to manage your own learning and your own career is going to stand you in good stead. If you can get those concepts across to employers, that's the kind of added value that you're going to be able to bring over and above an undergraduate degree. Okay, let's move on to what kind of jobs should you target. So I've split them into three different types, and they're not all equal quantities. You can look for Masters and PhD entry schemes. These are training schemes where they specifically ask for a high-level qualification. Now, these really aren't particularly common in the UK. There are some. I mean, you get them in research and development organisations where they're particularly looking for technical PhDs. Some of the consultancies have PhD entry points. They often have a kind of a master's undergraduate entry point, a PhD entry point, and an MBA entry point as separate different entry points. However, some of the biggest names in consultancy in the UK don't have a special entry point for PhDs. You go in as the same level as an undergraduate or a master's. For master's postgraduates, there are also some European programs, and you tend to find that a lot of European or people who recruit across Europe often look for masters as their key entry point. So that's where master's graduates can win out if you look at some of those cross-European schemes. However, if you're spending your time looking for postgraduate training schemes or postgraduate entry schemes, you're going to be looking for a long time and you're not going to find very much. These very much are in the minority. A larger group of programs are the standard graduate entry schemes. And these will take good undergraduates, but they'll also generally accept postgrads. They're very competitive. But the reason competitive is because these are the fast track to management. If an organization wants to recruit its potential leaders for the future, it's very often through one of these specialist graduate entry programs. So they'll generally have no problems accepting a master's. Some may be a bit dubious about accepting PhDs. One of the reasons for that is that PhDs are often a bit, they find it a bit galling having to think about competing with undergraduates, and make that clear during the application process. So if you do want to get onto one of these fast track to management programs, then I would certainly suggest not underplaying your PhD or your master's program, certainly, but to make it absolutely clear that you are happy to do whatever you want, whatever you have to do to learn from scratch, to work with other undergraduates. Because what we tend to find, I've seen this on several occasions, is that postgraduates, particularly PhDs who go into graduate entry schemes, 18 months later they're actually managing the graduates that joined with them, because you've gone in and you've just wowed them with how fast you can take information in, how fast you can use your initiative, and how fast you can deliver results. So don't ignore the graduate entry schemes, but they're not the only routes into employment. The one which is by far the largest, and is, I'm pretty sure, is where the majority of postgrads find jobs, are through direct entry. So these are jobs which may mention higher qualifications. They may even ask for experience, and in some cases you can sometimes point out that the work you've done during your postgraduate degree actually gives you the experience that they're looking for. But very often they won't even advertise. So for direct entry positions, it's certainly worth targeting organisations where there's an obvious link to your postgraduate degree and making a direct approach, or even better if you can make an approach through a contact. I know that Dan's got some more information on this in some of the blog posts and the advice posts on LinkHigher, so I suggest that you go and have a look at some of those as well. Okay, let's get on to my final content slide, the biggie. What am I worth? It's what everybody wants to know. Well, I'm going to give you one caution first, and then some advice on how to pitch the salary. And the caution is, yet again, this thing about postgraduate expectations, setting off alarm bells for quite a lot of employers. It's part of the baggage that employers worry about. And I've had it many times when I was a recruiter in industry, is that if you're at a recruitment fair as an employer and a postgrad comes up to talk to you, the first thing they will often ask, before even asking about what type of work you are, is, how much do you pay? Will you pay more for a postgraduate degree? And that's the only thing that they're interested in. And that rather ruins the reputation of postgrads for all the rest of you, who actually realise that you're going to have to give something before you get back. And from an employer's point of view, if you don't immediately offer something more than an undergrad, why should they pay you more? Now, if you know that you're worth more, it's up to you to have to convince them. But I really wouldn't suggest that that's the first thing that you do. You've got far more negotiating power if you go in, get them really interested in you, get them to offer you the job. That's when you've got a bit of negotiating power. So rather than leading off with, do you pay more for the postgrads, do you recognise a postgraduate degree, leave that till the final endpoint where you can now start to have some clout. So consider standard entry and negotiate the increases once you come up with the goods in the job, or at the start when you've already got them hooked and wanting to get you to join them. So whereabouts do you pitch your salary? This is really hard to say because there is no one standard salary. I do have some average salary data which I can maybe address during the questions if you've got questions about that. But it's really down to individual types of work, where you work, the size of the organisation. If you're a member of a professional organisation like the Institute of Chemical Engineers or the Institution of Civil Engineers, or some of the professional bodies like the Chartered Purchasing and Supply, then they run their own salary surveys, and that's very, very useful data to get hold of. If you're not a member of it and you've got a friend who's a member of those organisations, see if you can borrow their annual or biannual salary surveys. One thing I would suggest is beware of the newspaper headlines. You get to see a lot of headlines which are often about average graduate salaries. However, they're often just surveys of the biggest graduate employers. And these big graduate employers often pay more. So you may be talking about the investment banks. Yes, they are still there and still recruiting. The lawyers, the accountancy companies, and other big name employers. Whereas in practice, the real average graduate salary is often far lower than those newspaper headlines. So don't be over-impressed by some of the newspapers that you get to see. One other good source is where people are advertising jobs, but in practice, very, very many employers are not prepared to advertise salary ranges, which is why I was really pleased to see quite a lot of the employers on LinkHigher have been at least giving a salary range, so you've got some level of the expectations and the kind of salaries that you're looking to go for. So that's a bit about what you're worth. If you want any more information, then as Dan mentioned, I do run a postgraduate careers blog which has been going for quite a long time, and the web address is there on the screen. I tweet. One of my Twitter accounts is @manpgcareers. But in particular, I'd suggest that you have a good look at the LinkHigher site. There's a lot of good content on there as well as the jobs. I've been quite impressed by that, which is why I was quite happy to take part in this launch webinar. And following LinkHigher on @LinkHigher on the Twitter account. And if you're not on Twitter, why not? Okay. Right. So that's what I've had in terms of content to give you.